New Orleans Saints offensive lineman Ryan Ramczyk has been shut down for the 2024 season, and that will likely be when he calls it a career. We got all that and a little bit of lanyap for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? I am your host, your friend Ross Jackson, New Orleans native, your New Orleans Saints expert and credentialed member of the media covering those New Orleans Saints as a senior writer and reporter over at Saints News Network on SI. On today's episode of Locked On Saints, I'm going to tell you when the New Orleans Saints and their kind of reliance on the screen pass almost officially really fell off of a cliff, and it happened earlier than you might think. We'll also take a look at things like wheel routes, as well as outside zone runs for Alvin Kamara and more. So we're going to get to all that a little bit later in our Friday deep dive. But I want to start today taking a look at what happens next at right tackle. What happens if maybe Trevor Penning doesn't pan out, because things got a little bit more complicated, kind of. We all expected this, but Ryan Ramczyk officially now shut down for the 2024 season. New Orleans Saints former starting right tackle, and that's likely going to mean the end of his career as well. So what will the New Orleans Saints do next? We're going to break all of that down here, as well as some other injury-related transactions that the New Orleans Saints had on Thursday. We appreciate you very much, as always, making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day, and for being it every day or here on the show, which is a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So Ryan Ramczyk officially shut down for the 2024 season, and that will likely be the end of his career. It doesn't seem likely that we're going to see Ryan Ramczyk back in the black and gold. Big number 71, drafted in 2017 draft class, which was like the pinnacle draft class of the New Orleans Saints, along with maybe 2006 and a couple of others. But it stinks, man. Like this is a tough one. This is a tough one because you don't want to ever see somebody's time in the NFL wrap up outside of their decision for it to wrap up. And maybe some of that is true for Ryan Ramczyk here, but it certainly feels like at least things were accelerated a bit in terms of how this all went down. So what I want to do first is kind of break down what happened with Ryan Ramczyk, why this is happening instead, and why you're probably not going to hear about a retirement right away, because it actually would harm the Saints quite a bit. And then I'll run through a couple of the other injury-related transactions that the Saints had. Nothing super surprising outside of this. And then coming up next, we'll dive into what happens next at right tackle for the New Orleans Saints, both ideally and less than ideally. So to start off here, Ryan Ramczyk was placed on the reserve PUP, or physically unable to perform list, PUP. So there's two different versions of the PUP list there, or the PUP list. There's reserve PUP and there's active PUP. Typically at this time of the season or off season, it's not unusual to see players move to the active physically unable to perform list. Those are guys that have dealt with some type of injury during an NFL sanctioned event, whether that's a game, a practice, mini camp, OTA, stuff like that, and then can't get started with training camp at the very beginning because they're still rehabbing an injury, or there's like part of the ramp up period or whatever it might be. They could come off that list at any time if it's active PUP and return to practice. The only caveat is that they have to come off the list before they can return to practice, even though it typically doesn't happen externally in that order. Like you'll see a player go back to practice and then you'll hear that they were taken off the PUP list. That's all I mean. But the reserve PUP list is very different. And then it's also different for guys that are on like rookie deals versus guys that are vested veterans, i.e. have more than 7 years or a certain number of accumulated years in their career. And Ryan Ramczyk falls under the vested veteran category, which means that when he goes to reserve PUP, his season is done. It's the same as putting a player on injured reserve before roster cutdowns, which would effectively end, or not effectively, which would immediately end their season. It's the same deal. And so Ryan Ramczyk going on the physically unable to perform list, the reserve physically unable to perform list, does end his 2024 season. If he wasn't a vested veteran, then he would basically start the season on the PUP list, have to miss at least 4 games, and then would have the opportunity to potentially return to practice on a 3-week practice window before eventually coming back to the team or reverting to injured reserve if he can't actually get back to the active roster. This is very different. This shuts him down for the 2024 season. So why do this? Because look, not only does this shut him down for the 2024 season, we're pretty sure that that we have seen Ryan Ramczyk take his final snaps as an NFL player. Could he move into coaching? Could he move into some other things? Maybe, perhaps. But we're pretty sure that this means the end of Ryan Ramczyk's career. And it was a really good one. It was a really, really good one. And so I don't want that to ever be lost in the midst of this conversation. But why not just retire? Well, finances, salary cap, and other things, right? It's a money conversation at this point. If Ryan Ramczyk were to retire, the Saints would technically post June 1. So some of the money would end up accelerating into this year in terms of what's owed, which isn't a lot. But then a lot of money would accelerate into 2025, which would absolutely just destroy their salary cap situation in 2025, which is where they're trying to kind of, get back into a little bit more of an ideal standard when it comes to borrowing against next year and all those other things. Saints don't want to be going into every offseason $80 million over the salary cap like they are in 2025, $100 million over the salary cap like they were years ago, and all that. And if the Saints, who are currently over $80 million over the salary cap, were to do this, they would end up accruing a lot more money in 2025, which would put them even higher up over the salary cap. I believe either at least sniffing or just beyond $100 million over the salary cap, which the Saints do not want to have to deal with next year, especially with less and less and less restructure options available to them going into next year or going year into year into year into year. So instead, you put him on the reserve physically unable to perform list. It shuts him down for the 2024 season. He can go and enjoy his life as best he can with that lingering knee issue and degenerative knee issue, which is going to be a lifelong battle for him. And then into next year's offseason, he could officially retire. They could wait until June 1 to process that, right? They could work on the contract to knock it down. They could do the Drew Brees, right? I mean, $0 of his salary, of his base salary, is guaranteed for the next 2 years. So they could reduce that all the way down to a 1-year deal, remove years, whatever, reduce it all the way down to a 1-year deal, drop it down to the vet minimum, post his retirement as a post June 1 transaction, and then it impacts the 2026 salary cap a little bit more heavily than it would the 2025 salary cap, and impacts the 2025 salary cap in that instance a lot less than it would impact it if they were to process his retirement now. So this becomes a little bit of budgeting, a little bit of logistics, and a little bit of understanding in terms of how the New Orleans Saints are kind of navigating this situation with Ryan Ramczyk, which we believe does signal the end of Ryan Ramczyk's career, unless something massively surprising happens in the near future. Coming up next, I want to dive into what happens at right tackle now, especially if Trevor Penning doesn't pan out over on that side. What are the Saints' options? Real quick, I want to hit you with a couple of the other injury-related transactions that happened on Thursday. A few players moved to the active PUP list, which is the one that we talked about earlier, where they can come off at any time. Tight end Juwan Johnson, defensive end Chase Young, defensive lineman Tano Passanio, as well as linebacker Nephi Sewell. I would expect Juwan Johnson and Chase Young to probably come off of those lists much earlier than Tano Passanio and Nephi Sewell. Those guys probably kind of wandering around a little bit at the beginning of training camp, but then eventually progressing into being a full participant in training camp. The ramp-up period probably gets started for those guys a little bit earlier than Passanio as well as Sewell. Wide receiver, Bub Means, already off the NFI list. We said that would be quick. It was quick. I expect the same for the guy that just went on the NFI list, which is Chris Olave. Nick Underhill reporting that he was dealing with some back tightness, back soreness, things like that. He'll report for camp on July 23rd. Likely will take a physical at that point, pass that physical, and then move on. Remember, he was in a non-contact jersey at the end or throughout mandatory mini camps. So that's probably just something that carries over from there. Doesn't sound like anything of major concern when it comes to that conversation. All right, coming up next, what happens at right tackle for the New Orleans Saints and what are their options, especially if Trevor Penning doesn't pan out. We got that coming up for you as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints brought to you by friends at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to be able to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Whether you're looking for superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, whatever it is that you're looking for, you're going to be able to find over at ebaymotors.com. Com. With over 122 parts for your number one ride or die, you're going to be able to find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay's guaranteed fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. All the parts that you want at the prices that you need, you can find and make your car an MVP and bring home those huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive today by heading to ebaymotors.com. That's ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay guarantee fit available only to U.S. customers. Today's episode of Locked On Saints brought to you by friends at LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to make sure you're finding quality professionals to fit the right role that you're looking for. That's why you've got to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has all the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. Yeah, LinkedIn Jobs isn't just a job board. It is the job board. Name another one. You can't. I can't even think of other job boards. And neither can many LinkedIn users. Over 70% of users over on LinkedIn don't even visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking at LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. And on LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses find qualified candidates within 24 hours of posting their job. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn Jobs. Post your job for free today at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, family, with Ryan Ramczyk shut down for the 2024 season, it is necessary, even more necessary now that that Trevor Penning ends up panning out in his recent position change over to the right side. But he's not the only option. The Saints do have options in terms of how they want to go about that. So we're going to break that down here as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. Appreciate you as always making us your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget to go and check out Locked On Sports Today, the 24/7 stream built specifically for you to make sure you're getting all of the biggest stories around sports and you're getting them from the local experts that know the teams the best and without all the yelling and screaming that you're going to find at some of those other networks. So go and check it out today. Make the switch to Locked On Sports Today by visiting Locked On Sports Today's YouTube page, and you can also find the free Amazon Fire TV channels app as well, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So for the New Orleans Saints, they have some options here when it comes to how they pursue the solutions at right tackle. Now, let me acknowledge that this isn't a new thing. This isn't a new issue. The New Orleans Saints have known, and we've known from the offset of basically the combine/owners meeting, right? Either one of those conversations, that the Saints were going to need a new starting right tackle, at least at the beginning of the 2024 season. So they've been prepared for this. They've moved Trevor Penning over to the right side, giving him an opportunity while rookie Taliese Fuaga moves over to the left side to give him a shot there. I don't mind the Saints' approach with that the more and more that I've thought about it. You look at some of these wide zone offenses around the NFL, San Francisco, Miami included. I spoke with former NFL scout and host over at the Peacock and Williamson NFL show, Matt Williamson, who's an absolute genius. And he was talking about how San Francisco and Miami kind of just get the one tackle position right and then just fill out their offensive line. They don't have 5 A-tier players. They've got an A-tier player and then a bunch A-tier player at the most important spot for Brock Purdy, right-handed quarterback, left tackle, protects his blind side. Get that right. Trent Williams, there you go. Miami, left-handed quarterback, blind side over on the right side, get the right tackle spot right. There you go. And then the rest of the guys are kind of C's beyond that. Although I really like John Feliciano over in San Francisco as well. I don't want to disrespect him in any way. I think he's more of a B, right? But the Saints have another A on their offensive line in Eric McCoy. They've got a B on their offensive line in Cesar Ruiz. If you want to say he's a C, then fine, he's a C. It all equals up. It all adds up, especially if you can get the A at left tackle. So it becomes really interesting with these wide zone offenses and how the system can help to support the offensive line in a specific way or in a particular way to where you just get like the blind side guy right, and then the rest of the guys can file in, but you're at an advantage if you're the New Orleans Saints in that type of construction because you have one of the best centers in the game in Eric McCoy. So if the Saints end up keeping Taliese Fuaga over on the left side, but needing somebody to pan out over on the right side, doesn't necessarily have to be an A tier player. It could be a C tier player and be fine. But if Trevor Penning doesn't work out, and look, position changes, don't typically pan out for struggling players. I can't think of many examples of that. I guess you might be able to throw Taysom Hill out there, but Taysom Hill never got the opportunity to be a struggling quarterback before he was thrown into special teams roles back in 2018 for the New Orleans Saints and all this stuff. He didn't, he was behind, he was on a team with Aaron Rodgers that already had a quarterback. He never got the opportunity to struggle like quarterback before he moved positions and all these other things. So it just doesn't typically pan out for those guys. And so if that ends up being the case, what do you do at right tackle? So the ideal situation is that Penning pans out. We know that. If Penning doesn't pan out over at the right tackle spot, you could move Taliese Fuaga from left tackle over to right tackle, put him back at his natural position, and then see if maybe Penning pans out over on the left side. But do you want to take that risk? We're talking about making sure that you solidify the most important position, which is the blind side blocker, which is that left tackle spot. Maybe you keep Taliese Fuaga there with that in mind. But that is an option. Switch them back over to the natural positions and then see if that ends up working out. Another option would be Trevor Penning doesn't work out at right tackle. A guy like Udoh or a guy like Landon Young end up stepping in at right tackle. You keep Taliese Fuaga over at left tackle. I think we're probably on the same page, you and I, that keeping Taliese Fuaga over at left tackle is the better option than moving Penning back over there because he struggled there. And if he continues to struggle there, it could cost a lot for this New Orleans Saints team as the blindside blocker, that really important spot. So I think we're on the same page probably when it comes to Taliese Fuaga staying over on the left side. So if that's the case, a guy like Landon Young stepping in at right tackle, who has played there and who has started there for the New Orleans Saints before, Philadelphia Eagles game just a couple years ago in place of Ryan Ramczyk, and then Udoh, who has played on the interior in Clint Kubiak's offense more than on the outside, but is a natural tackle in terms of his time at Elon University and coming into the NFL and being drafted. He has the athleticism to fit the bill, all those other pieces. So it could be an interesting spot. And in fact, he's kind of my dark horse to start at right tackle if Penning doesn't pan out. In fact, we did our training camp preview over at WWL Thursday night. We filmed it. And one of the big things that we discussed in there was who's going to start at right tackle, who's going to start at left guard. We all agreed on Saldiveri starting at left guard. I said Udoh was going to start at right tackle, mostly because I wanted to throw a curveball in for the sake of conversation, but also like it makes sense. He knows the system already. He's got the connection with Clint Kubiak. There's trust there. They brought him in. He hasn't gotten an opportunity to do anything during OTAs and mini camps just yet because of the quadriceps injury, I believe. But he's expected to be a larger part of training camp, and him not going to physically unable to perform, him not going to like one of those injury lists kind of furthers that as well. So Udoh could be a potential example. Another option is to go out there and sign somebody. You now have a roster spot available. With Ryan Ramczyk going on reserve PUP, it does open up a spot on your 90-man roster. All those other guys that went on active PUP and Chris Olave going on NFI, non-football injury list, those guys don't count against, they don't free up a roster spot. They still count against the 90-man roster. But now you have an open spot with Ramczyk being on that reserve, physically unable to perform list. So you could go out there and get a veteran. You can go out there and grab a David Bakhtiari, see what he can do for you. You can go out there and grab a Cam Irving, a guy that was with the Saints last year, started at right tackle in place of Ryan Ramczyk against the Jacksonville Jaguars, performed well, is a fantastic culture fit for this team, has the athleticism. I don't know how much experience he has in the wide zone systems, but you got to be able to know how to run outside zone. You got to be able to know how to zone block. You got to be able to man block. You got to be able to do all these things. If you're going to be an offensive lineman in the NFL, the only difference in a system is the percentage to which you run certain things. A wide zone offense is going to run zone runs more than non-wide zone offenses. Doesn't mean that they're going to run it more than they run gap schemes or man schemes, just more than a typical offense is going to run it. Same thing for when you're worried about the wide zone and you're going to those outside zones. Same thing. You're going to run it more than other offenses, but it doesn't mean that that's what you're going to run the most. You're just going to run it more than everybody else. So if Cam Irving is a guy who just got a tryout with the Houston Texans, by the way, if he's an option, I think he could be a pretty good one to bring in and allow to come in and help compete. So I think if nothing else, shoring up the depth at right tackle and getting as many options, as much competition there as possible would be in the best interest of the New Orleans Saints, who just have this roster spot now open. with Ryan Ramczyk stepping out. So, or his season being done before he gets the opportunity to get started. So Saints have options. Obviously, the ideal situation, though, is that Trevor Penning is your starter at right tackle. But if that doesn't pan out, they still have options in terms of where they can go next. Speaking of where we're going next up, we're going to be taking a look at when the screen pass all of a sudden started to vanish from the New Orleans Saints offense. And surprise, it happens a lot earlier than maybe you might have expected. We got that coming up for you as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's show is sponsored by BetterHelp. BetterHelp Therapy Online has been absolutely awesome to me, especially in a time where we spend more time comparing our lives to other people's instead of being able to appreciate what it is that we have. And look, maybe that's something that kind of got, elevated because of social media and things like that. But what do you do when you get caught up thinking more about someone else's life than your own? That's where therapy can be a big time help to you. Comparison is the thief of joy, they say, and therapy is the solve to a lot of my problems, I say. So I would absolutely recommend going and check out BetterHelp, especially if you've been thinking about therapy for a while. It's entirely online. It is designed to be convenient, flexible, suited to your schedule. So stop comparing to others and start focusing on yourself with the help of BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon for 10% off of your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. When the New Orleans Saints stopped using screen passes as often as they used to in their offense might actually surprise you. We appreciate you very much for being here for another episode of Locked On Saints. We are your team every day. I will not have an episode Saturday and Sunday as per usual, but we'll get started with two-a-days and all that kind of stuff going into next week. Monday, we're going to do one more big preview of training camp along with Tuesday. So kind of look offense, defense, look at some of the big storylines over on each side. Wednesday, and then Tuesday night, you'll have a second episode. Thus begins two-a-days. So the second episode on Tuesday will be kind of reacting to some of the things that we pick up ahead of training camp. We expect to, have time with coaches and things like that. We'll see if we get that as we expect. And then two-a-days kick off. So Wednesday, a little bit of a preview of camp. Send your questions in for each episode, all that stuff. And then Wednesday after camp, live every day, giving you all of the biggest stories from around the Saints training camp. So make sure you're coming through for all of that with two-a-days returning next week. We appreciate you very much, as always, for making us a part of your day. You're about to make us part of your day twice a day, and I'm really, really excited for training camp to get started. Football's back, baby. And speaking of football, Friday is typically the day that we do kind of these deep dives and things like that. And so to kind of wrap this up before we get into training camp, I want to take a look at some of the beloved or previously beloved pieces of the New Orleans Saints offense: screen passes, wheel routes with Alvin Kamara, and the outside zone run game with Alvin Kamara, which of course we expect to see a rejuvenation of here in 2024, excuse me. And I kind of see like when things actually really started to slow down, because I think that we all had the assumption that things really started to trickle off when Pete Carmichael took off offensive play calling, and turns out that is not the case. So here's some numbers to kind of look over real quick. Screen passes, right? So I looked at this from the perspective of each quarterback, every quarterback that played in a particular season, all that kind of stuff. So let's go back to 2016, 2017. In 2016, Drew Brees threw 56 screen passes, 34 of which went to running backs. Over 50% of those went to running backs. Nearly 2/3 went to running backs. 2017, though, was the year of the screen pass for the New Orleans Saints. And remember, this too is when, Alvin Kamara flew off on the scene and all this other stuff too. The offensive line got a lot more athletic with the addition of Ryan Ramczyk, all that stuff. So 92 screen passes that year, 55 of which going to running backs. Then it kind of trickled back down. 2018, 58 screen passes. So still more than 2016. And again, the majority of those going to running backs. It was really 2019 where the screen pass fell off, which is so interesting to me, right? Because 2019 was really the year where I think a lot of people started talking about, the conversation around Drew Brees' arm, all this other kind of stuff really, really started to come into focus. That was post his incredible 2018 run that should have been a Super Bowl team, but unfortunately were robbed of that opportunity. But then at 2019, for whatever reason, screen passes 43 that year. So less than half of what they did just 2 years before that in 2017. And listen to this, 2019, 43, 2020, 41. That's the end of Drew Brees' cycle. Tick back up to 55 with Jameis Winston, Taysom Hill, Trevor Siemian, and then a game of Ian Book where he didn't throw any screen passes. So that didn't really contribute. But tick back up to 55 in Sean Payton's last year in 2021, then fell all the way down to 31 with Jameis and Dalton in 2022, and then back up to 53 with Derek Carr. So really the big drop-off happened in 2019 and 2020, and here in 2023, the numbers tick back up. And the numbers feel like they're going to hover right around here. Of the 53 screen passes that Derek Carr threw last year, 26 of them went to running backs. This number is not far off, just over 50 with Kirk Cousins back in 2021. 25 of them going to running backs in 2021. The reason why I bring that up is because that's the last time that Clint Kubiak was a full-time play caller in the NFL. So really, really interesting that drop-off actually happened at 2019. And in last year, in a year where we were still going, where's a screen pass? It was actually as much as 2016, just shy of where it was 2018. But boy, nothing touches 2017, those 92 screen passes that were thrown that year. So we'll see. We'll see how many it goes up. But I almost expect it to look the same in 2024 as it did in 2023. So then the question is, can you be more efficient at executing those screen passes? And we've already seen the New Orleans Saints rip off a big one against their own defense during minicamp. So we'll see if they're able to keep that trajectory going. But interesting. Still Sean Payton, still Drew Brees. Drop off of the screen pass happened during that time. Let's look at AK's wheel routes. So this one's a little bit tricky because it's hard sometimes to decipher what was going to be a wheel route, but the ball was thrown quickly, so it turned into an out route versus what was actually run to be an out route. So I combined them both, wheel routes and out routes, and then looked at it to either side. And really the drop off here, I'm not going to run through all the numbers, but Alvin Kamara was over 100 and was at 100 or more of these routes in 2018, 2019. Again, not all wheel routes, but certainly wheel and out routes. So getting out in the space and things like that. And if you're wondering what a wheel route is, think about like coming out of the backfield, going into the flat over in the side, but then turning upfield. And then it kind of turns into a go route after that. But the real drop off happened. The first drop off happened from 2020 into 2021. So this was in between the Drew Brees. This was the Drew Brees retirement where 90 routes run in that configuration down to 47 routes run in that configuration. And really, as I looked at it, of those 47, it's hard to identify any that ever turned upfield. So a lot of those are still out routes rather than wheel routes. 2022 ticked back up to 91, but again, very few of those actually turning upfield in the action of the play. 2023, 45, I couldn't find a single one that turned upfield for Alvin Kamara in particular. And you can see the reception numbers trickle down too. You saw from 2017 to 2020, 24 catches, 31 catches, 26 catches, 26 catches. And then that dropped 2021, 2022, 2023, 14 catches, 21 catches, 14 catches. So really that cutoff happened post Drew Brees, but still with Sean Payton being around before the Pete Carmichael of it all. And then finally, the outside zone run. Well, the drop off on the outside zone run is a really interesting one because really the drop off happened in terms of their ability to be able to produce in this game from an efficiency standard. 122 in 2023, 121 outside zone runs in 2020, 72 in 2017. So it wasn't really ever a question of the volume of outside zone runs. It was the efficiency of those outside zone runs. 2017, 7.3 yards per carry to the outside for Alvin Kamara. 2018, 4.1, 2019, 4.6, 2020, 4.3. All very good. All very, 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 very good. But then you got to sub 4 yards in each of the last three seasons, 3.6, 3.7, 3.7. That's in 2021 through 2023. So I think the biggest cutoff here really happens between 2020 to 2021. So again, still in the Sean Payton era, right? That goes into Sean Payton's last year. The efficiency drop was the biggest thing. So now the question is the efficiency drop because the team struggled to execute this? or has the efficiency been dropping because of a drop off at the running back position in particular? That, I think, is something we're going to get a big time answer to here in 2024. So just interesting stuff that kind of gives you an idea of where these beloved pieces of the New Orleans Saints offense went and when they went away. So there you go. Interesting stuff, I hope, in our Friday deep dive. We'll see you on Monday, y'all. We appreciate you very much, as always, making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget to go and check out Locked On Pelicans Summer League. Mercifully finally over for the New Orleans Pelicans. They have been not good. But Jake has been covering it every sense of the way, every step of the way. So make sure you go and check in with Jake Madison over at Locked On Pelicans. And of course, #1 cornerback has now recruited to LSU. They have been on fire on the recruiting trail. You want updates on that? Locked On LSU's Matt Moscona has you covered every single Monday through Friday. Appreciate you very much, as always, making Locked On Saints a part of your day, part of your routine, for saying yes to me on the show. As always, if you see me, please say hi. And if you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on your favorite social media at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing. Let me know how you living. Let me know how your mom and them. And trust Who Dat Nation. I'll holla at you. Covering those New Orleans Saints over at Sports Illustrated. Nope. What am I doing?